and welcome back to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we might include them in our role-playing campaigns. With me, back again, but second time on this podcast after our wonderful chat about tools is Shahig. Shahig, nice to have you back, my friend. How are you?
Hello! Thank you for having me back. I loved being here the first time around, and I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah, no, it was a really good response, actually, that we had to tools and stuff like that. Because, again, other people listening were like, oh, yeah. And so, no, I was very delighted that you brought such a new like angle to what we were talking about and stuff like that. So, yeah, I was like, well, we have to have you back on to talk about your other favourite passion and stuff like that. But in the meantime, how have you been? Have you been playing any RPGs? What's new with you, I guess?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think I did Vasen with Euphoria, the Twitch actual play channel. Yeah. I played that, which was really fun. I've been discovering a lot of new, like, much smaller games. I just played Rom-Com Drama Bomb by
amazing.
Elliot Davis. Mm-hmm. Yes. I played a different Rom-Com RPG a few months ago. I'm about to play Honey Heist with some of my friends.
Oh, cute.
I've just been discovering a lot of new stuff, but I've also, been playing D&D.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, it's nice to hear you not only having like regular gaming sessions, but also different gaming sessions. Because a lot of times people just go are lucky enough to have one continuous story. Like, great, that's great. But then I'm like, well, what about other games? So it sounds like you're having a ball just now, and like
Yeah, I'm having a great
different
time.
genres as well. I've heard of like rom-com drama bomb. I've not played it myself yet, so
it was so fun.
I was gonna say, is that a genre that you really like, or is that something that you just discovered? Like
rom-coms, or
no, the RPG itself. Like, is that were you always going to try that out? You know what I mean? Like, what was it about that game?
Well, I only found out about it like 2-ish weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I love rom-coms, so that's why I was immediately interested. But also, I don't know, it sounded like a fun game. I don't know if there's really anything complicated about it, It's, to people who don't know, it's about, it's a game played with exactly 3 players.
Mm-hmm.
You've got one person who's the villain, and then the 2 people who are the leads. And then the villain is basically forcing the leads to act out a rom-com. And
Incredible.
you can pick, like, what love trope you are, and you can, like, the villain can pick what kind of villain they are, what their motivations are. And it's all very camp, and that's what I love, I think. Very camp,
cool.
Very fun, very tropey. Mm-hmm. So it's like, because I've watched so many rom-coms, it's kind of fun to use all of that very valuable knowledge of all the tropes and whatever's to act it out, especially accurately, let's just say.
That's so cool. Like, because I know Elliot's, the people behind it, at least, they released like a supplement for Christmas as well. Because obviously, Hallmark, movies are bloody everywhere, as I've discovered. So yeah, I was just like, of course you're gonna capitalize is not the right word I'm thinking of, but you're like, wow. I was like, I'm gonna have to check more about this game.
They certainly did. They certainly did release a Christmas supplement that I want to play one day. I don't know. What is the rating of this podcast?
Oh, it's open to anyone. I mean, they've got explicit on the side, so I'm sure it'll be okay. It's just your mileage may vary with these things.
Listen, they got a horny Santa, and I'm down. I'm down for a horny Santa. And they've got art. They've got this sexy ass art of Santa.
So good, yeah.
Like, sir,
sir, I've opened my presents early.
I'm a professional at work. And I'm here to talk about other things.
Indeed. Well, Shahik, what are we talking about today? Which is clearly not rom-com related. What is our topic of choice?
But equally as horny. No, I'm kidding. We're talking about Heart, the City Beneath, the horror RPG by Rowan Rook and Deckard or Deckard? You pronounce it differently than me last time, and then I got self-conscious. I'm like, have I been saying it wrong?
Either way, I say Deckard, but it could be Deckard. It's
sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, I should switch to Deckard. That sounds cooler. But yeah, we're talking about Heart, the City Beneath, which is like one of my favorite games / possibly my favorite game. It's a game I've run a good few times in the past, and it's great. And I mentioned it a bit last time, and I was here on the podcast, and Fiona was like, come back, talk about it more. So I did.
Yeah, it's because, I admit, as someone who has run or read a lot of Rowan Rook and Deckard games, I've played in a little bit of Heart, but I'd never read it from cover to cover. And because I remember when Spire originally came out, so that's the city above, and then Heart came a couple of years afterwards, which is, they're both sort of connected in a sense of the setting, but both of them are playing sort of different genres. And when I again, when I sort of heard about Heart, I was like, oh, horror. I was like, oh, great. But I seem to remember from when I quickly looked at Spire, there was just a lot of lore and a lot of stuff. And I was just there going like, oh, I'm a one-shot person, back in the dizzying heights of, 1920? No, 2019. Wow.
1920.
Wow. So
You
far
look
back.
great.
Thanks.
You look great.
And recently I've got into, obviously, I love horror and all that sort of thing. And so, and Heart itself was like, last year, it had like a big sort of renaissance. So they had their sort of re-edition came out. Quinn's Quest was like saying, you guys need to play Heart as well as Spire. And so it's really in the zeitgeist just now. And then when you were talking about it last time, I was like, well, now I have an expert to help talk me through. Well, no, but you run it more than most people. This is the thing. I feel like we talked about this just now with like, you trying different systems, but it's like a one shot here, a one shot there. I don't know anyone else that's run a long campaign or at least a good couple of sessions of a series like something like Hard. I've heard how good it is, but I was like, oh, I wonder what it's like. So that's why I got you back to chat about it. So yeah, I'm really keen to see what we can delve into, so to speak,
Come on.
There you go. I read it. There you go. I read the book.
Yep. You know what you're talking about.
So you said last time that you'd ran like an actual play series using Heart. I just wondered, like, did you instantly, like, you read it and you're like, I want to play it, or were you sort of like fishing around for ideas and just stumbled on the system? I was like, what was your sort of first contact, I guess, with Heart? Like, how did you find it?
Okay, so very clear. We had 2 seasons. Second season didn't finish, but we did have 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. I ran season 2. My friend ran season 1, and that was most of the show, really, because that one actually finished, concluded. But she was the one that found the system, loved it. This is back in 2020. She was the person that found the system, loved it, and then posted on a server we were in, hey, who wants to do a actual play podcast with the system? And I absolutely, oh my God, wanted to so badly. I didn't know the system yet, but I would have done it with any system, really. Mm-hmm. And I got lucky that it was this system, and I fucking loved it.
So what you're saying is that you sort of like, yeah, I want to do an actual play. What is it? So you it wasn't the system that drew you, you just happenstance, and then you sort of fell in love with it from there.
Yeah, I loved doing things. I loved saying yes to things, and I loved the idea of being in an actual play podcast. I loved the idea of being in a podcast, and I loved playing RPGs. So,
it's like a sort of a marriage made in heaven, so to speak.
1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. Then obviously you sort of saying then you took over sort of season 2. But you carried on Heart. Was that again like a choice to be like, because we love the system so much and the story wasn't finished? Like, I guess what was it about the system that endeared it to yourself?
Oh yeah, well the thing is we didn't start out thinking it's going to be a different system every season. We knew, oh okay, there's a Heart podcast. This is a podcast using the system Heart. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like a thing where we had to sit down and be like, do we want to use a different system for next season? Also because like we loved the idea of interconnecting the seasons, even though they are standalone seasons. I loved the idea of building the world, because then we had an NPC that became a player character in season 2, and we had reoccurring like concepts and here and there, and so it wasn't really a decision to be made of whether we want to play a different game. It's just we knew that we wanted to run Heart. The idea was that a different person would be the GM every season. Naturally, we only managed to do that for 2 seasons. Still 2 great seasons. I absolutely loved it. It was amazing. 2 years that I still love remembering.
For those people who are like brand new to role-playing games and have gone like, what on earth are you guys talking about? Can you sort of like summarize what is Heart exactly? We've talked about it being a horror. We've talked about it being below this big city. Like, what do you think are the standout features of Heart? If you were to try to get someone into, if you were going to do like, I'm doing an actual play, like what's your sort of key notes that you would get to people into?
First word to use with Heart, obviously. Horror. It's a horror system. It takes place in a very specific world. You've got the spire, the city above, and then underneath it, the heart. So it's got its own specific rules of physics and time, and like with D&D, it is a fantasy world. But I think because there's so much lore out there from all the books, the Forgotten Realms, and so many maps and so many worlds out there, cities, towns, whatever, that it's almost easier. And what most people, from my experience, do with D&D is they just create their own, you know? They see it as very much like a sort of blank slate. If sure, fantasy, but also a lot of people take it and then put it in a different world, not fantasy, maybe in a world modern setting. You very much homebrew it. With Heart, it gives you just enough lore, but still leaves it just open-ended, where it allows for so much creativity, where all the locations are so interesting.
Yes.
But they don't restrict you. No. You don't have to use any of them. You don't have to use any of them as they are written. All the classes, they have the classes and the callings, which we'll get to. They all have motivations, pre-built motivations and abilities and whatnot, which used to, you know, it starts as like a prompt and starting off points of what you want your character to be, but none of them are mandatory. You know, you can create your own callings, you can create your own beats, or you can twist and turn the existing ones in the ways that you want that will best service your character. Yeah, like I said before, the best way I would describe Heart is it's just a big bowl of creativity, super pigmented, if I can use that metaphor of creativity, but not in a way that feels restrictive. It's not like you're just reading somebody's book and then you can't really add anything to it. It allows for so much interpretation and so much of your own input.
Yeah, that's the big thing that comes across time and again when you read Heart, the full core book, is that it insists that GMs do not prep anything.
Yes.
You are looking to your players, right? And I'm like going, great, I don't prep anything. But I mean, some GMs might go, what do you mean? I have a vision, you know, the templed fingers, like proper GM. No, and I think you're right, that pre-built motivations to each of the characters, by choosing, again, we'll go into more detail this in a second, when the characters choose what their advances are, you know, what their beats are, that is telling the GM, the storyteller, hey, I'm interested as a player in these things.
Exactly.
And you can take all that stuff. It's so player-led, this system. And that's fascinating that it's just so upfront about it. And he goes, GM, you don't need to prep anything. I mean, the system itself, like, I still find a little bit convoluted at times, but that's just because I've not played it and run it through. I think that's the thing. I would say, I absolutely agree with you, what you're saying. Like, I wouldn't sell Heart on the system to brand new people to role-playing games, just because it's a little bit dense in places. But I think once you play it and run it through, and like yourself, you've run it through several times now, it must get easier and easier. But that sort of big thing at the top saying, GMs, don't prep. Look to your players. They will tell you what you want and what they want. And I'm just like, amazing.
The system itself is interesting as well. Like, I wouldn't sell it to people who are new to role-playing games, because once I start talking about resistances and tracks and Fallout, they're not going to know what the hell I'm talking about. But I would use it as a selling point for people who do know what they're talking about, who've played maybe D&D before, maybe some other games, whatever. I do love the system as well when it comes to the rules and whatnot. So it uses a resistance system, which I'm pretty sure they made up in the Spire. And they used it again in Heart, the City Beneath. And basically what it is instead of damage, like HP, and I'm going to be comparing it to D&D a lot because that's what this podcast is, though usually I would try to skirt around comparing it to D&D and pretend like the people I'm talking to don't just know D&D as a comparison point. But instead of HP, hit points, and whatnot, you have 5 resistance tracks. And those are Blood, Mind, Echo, Supplies, and Fortune. And every time you take stress, which is what damage is called, basically, the GM has to tell you what kind of stress it is. So maybe you got hit in the leg. Obviously, that's blood. But if you saw somebody die in front of you, you might take mind stress because that really affects your psyche. Or if somebody robbed you, you know, that's supply stress. I mean, these aren't the best examples because I feel like somebody robbing you would really be a supply Fallout, but whatever.
These 5 tracks are sort of like, they cover all the big things, essentially.
Yeah. And, you know, if anything doesn't fit the main 4, then throw in Fortune and you'll be fine.
Yeah, agreed. I did see that as well, yeah. Fortune is like the luck example. If it doesn't fall into anything else, go for fortune. So yeah.
It's luck, but it's also like if you're being overconfident and that sort of thing. Once you do take stress itself is not tangible, does not have tangible mechanical effects on your character, but it does make it more likely. The more stress you have makes it more likely that you will get a fallout, which is actual tangible consequences, effects on your character. So a lot of the simple ones that are more easier for people to understand if they're coming from D&D are the blood ones. So basic, like a minor blood fallout would be, oh, your arm is hurt. Oh, no. Using, I don't know, your weapon's going to be bad. You're going to be bad at it.
It's going to be a more risky move than a standard move and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
It's a difficulty on it, yeah.
But something like an echo fallout would be you suddenly disappear and then you only reappear into the world after everybody has had a turn to do something. A fortune fallout would be somebody somebody important in the place you're going to does not like you.
Yeah.
The GM needs to figure out why. And it could be a place you haven't even been to before. It's just, yeah, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Those are the fallouts you get. Every time you take stress, the GM rolls to see if you get a fallout. And then if you get a fallout, then you're in trouble. The more fallouts you have, the worse you're feeling. Then fallouts can get combined. And then if you combine two major fallouts, you've got minor fallouts, you've got major fallouts, and then you've got criticals, which is what kills you.
Yeah.
So if you have two major fallouts, I think they have to be of the same kind. I always confuse this.
I think it's either the two kind, or I think it's like if it feels appropriate and the player's like, no, combine them. I believe that's the case. Again, as we've discovered reading this game, it's like, don't pay attention to the system. This is just some ideas. It's like, I liked how you said it before. It's like, it doesn't feel like you're reading someone's like novel or anything like that. Obviously, a lot of Rowan, Rook and Descartes stuff has a lot of setting and stuff, but instantly it says up front, it goes like, make up your own landmarks, do whatever. You were saying before about, all these landmarks, not all of them appear in the canon heart.
There's a line that they say in the book is that the things that are said and played in your game of heart are far more canon than anything written in this book itself. You don't have to use any of the locations. The locations written in here, your heart does not have to have all of them. It can have some of them and then some of your own creation, or it can have all of them if you want, but you're not supposed to use all of them.
Yes, yeah.
What it means when it says don't plan ahead, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but by talking about that a little, but we've sort of mentioned it a couple times by now, and what it means by don't plan ahead is, well, not what it means, but it is correct, because every time I run Heart, my notes are these vague writings of a madman with ideas of like, okay, eventually I want this to happen, and how I'm going to get there, I have no idea.
But I think it's interesting, as someone who's done a lot of improv, and just and a lot of, it's so interesting. I've said this before when I on this podcast, is that as a dungeon master or a GM or anything like that, I love a good quick start scenario. I love adventures because I hold on to them very, very tightly, because I am so worried that I'll just be like, oh, I've forgotten everything in the last session. Oh no, they look to me and I need to make the story and it needs to be cohesive. But then I will get like an adventure, I go, this is boring, and then jump off it and do my own thing, and no one knows the difference. And I think it's that confidence as well. So I think, if you're looking at Heart for the first time going like, oh my God, what do I do? You know, I think there's that worry about like having to improvise on the fly. But if you've run several different systems, or even just run D&D a lot, players, as soon as they interact with any story, it changes what you have planned anyway. So you're already in a combat stance, you know what I mean? You're ready to go, and you're like, oh, go with the punches, that sort of thing. So I think maybe at first it feels like, oh God, it feels like there's a lot. But actually reading through, like reading the landmarks, reading the adversaries, all that sort of thing, you go, oh, this is really cool. Well, let's see what the players want. And then you can draw those lines, those threads, make your own little conspiracy board and go, right, we're going to go to these landmarks. And then, like you said, change the name of them, change where it's here they are. Don't have them disappear, you know?
Well, I mean, the Heart does that already all the time, but we'll get to that. But, okay, so most of the time what goes into planning for a Heart campaign is delves, planning delves, but also reading and figuring out the landmark they're going to be in. And because going from one landmark to another always requires a delve, usually they're not going to be in more than one landmark in a session, which means you can figure out where they're gonna be next during that session. You can, oftentimes what I did is I have ideas of like, okay, these are the cool places that I like, that I would like them to go to,
Yes.
or that I feel like would serve the story best. And if they ask me, okay, what's nearby, I'll give them a couple of options of what's nearby, but I don't plan those locations ahead because it's going to take them half a session to delve there in the first place.
Yeah.
Delve is the word that the system uses for basically traveling there. Delving is a mechanic. While on D&D, it's a lot of survival checks or just like understanding, okay, it would take us 5 days to get there, so, you wait for 5 days on the horse, whatever, which is great for D&D, but in Heart, every time you go from one place to another, it's called a delve, and it's its own number of checks and maybe obstacles and whatnot. And because every Heart campaign, a typical campaign of Heart, includes you starting from higher up in the city beneath, aka Heart, that's just another name for it, and then delving deeper and deeper and deeper, which means you're constantly traveling, which means you're never in one place at a time, which means you only ever need to just plan one landmark at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't know where they're going to want to go. You can never plan where they're going to go. You might tell them, like, okay, so here's the locations that are nearby. You've the next one, the closest one is a Vermiss's station, and then there's also something called the Labyrinth. Not that that would be on a map.
These weird rumors of a labyrinth. Yeah.
And also you've got the tower that's also nearby. There's something called the tower on a map that you're seeing. But then they would be like, well, fuck all that. I actually want to go and I need to sell stuff. So what's the closest market I can find? And then screw all. I mean, that's normal to all role-playing games. So I don't know why I'm even going into that.
You've hit on something that I think is a key thing about Hard, which is not mentioned a lot of, I think, or it's not one of the standout things until you start playing it. So like you said, like, the Heart itself, it is like it's again, a lot of it is body horror themed, but it's like this idea of a big dungeon that is constantly generating itself. Again, not to use the comparison to AI necessarily, but those weird dreamscapes of it just constantly changing. That's how
yeah, that's a good comparison. The Heart is ever changing. It is constantly shifting. There's a lot of different theories on what the Heart is itself. Some say, oh, it's a godling. Some say it's a little goo creature that wants to take over the world. Some say it's nothing. It's just a radiation. Who knows? I'm sure there's theories that it's actually not anything at all, and everybody's just placebo affecting themselves to death. In all of the theories, the one running through the one through line is that it changes according to the people's desires and expectations.
Yeah.
The reason why tier 4, part of the reason why tier 4, aka the deepest, aka the Heart itself, the closest you can get to it, is so unstable. And only just part of the reason is because there aren't a lot of people there and people don't stay there for a long time. Tier 1 is more stable because people actually build havens there. Well, again, it's farther away from the Heart and that's why it's stable, but also it becomes more stable is a sort of cycle, as a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy because people stick around and people stay in one place at a time for longer. And because once people stay in one place for a long period of time, that place becomes more stable because there's more people there now, more ideas of how things should look like for the Heart to feed on. Because the Heart can only feed on those desires and expectations very small bits at a time.
Yeah, it's very much these ideas of people banding together for shared interests. And as you said, like going back to that idea of the delves, because each delve is going to be different, a landmark may move, etc., from where it is.
Yeah, they move all the time. They move around. A city could just disappear and then appear in tier 3. Yeah. Actually, earlier today I was planning for this podcast, and I was like, oh my god, I should do a campaign where people living in tier 1 or even Derelictus, which is an even safer, more stable part, that landmark maybe just completely disappears and suddenly appears in tier 3, which is so much more dangerous, so much more unstable. Time and physics, it's so much more weird. And imagine like what it would look like for the people living in that completely like sort of maybe it's like an especially normal seeming haven that suddenly appears in tier 3. How would people adjust and whatnot? But how would they fight their way back out? Exactly, that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
because just the idea of the delves, because they feel so unique compared to say D&D Wild Exploration. About like it is. There's no fast travel. You know, you can't be like, oh, we're going to go to this landmark or whatever. Every time it is a journey, and it's a struggle because you might die, you might face creatures or anything like that. But each of it is different. A mixture of because the players, they'll have their minor beats and major beats telling you where they want to go, and then inflicting, as we sort of call it, this resistance on the delve itself. So depending on how much resistance they do, depends on how far along they are in the delve and all that sort of thing.
Stress.
Yes.
They inflict stress
the delve's
on
resistance.
the delve.
That's what it is. Yes. So
the resistance, your resistance as well as on NPCs and a delves is basically your HP bar, and then you inflict stress onto a thing, an item, a delve, a person, to sort of lower that resistance.
Yes.
And you can have protection for the resistance, which is basically sort of armor and etc.
Again, I think a lot of it is about the journey, which I think in traditional D&D people aren't too fussed about. They're like, oh, we're there, and then you're in the city, etc. I think it's more interesting. The journey's the more interesting thing about Heart, because you genuinely don't know if you're going to make it to that next landmark.
Oh yeah, you could absolutely die during the delve. Also, you're supposed to die in a Heart campaign. Heart campaigns aren't built to last years like a D&D game would. They're supposed to, in the book, it says an ideal length of a campaign is 8 sessions. I have been in 2 games that were significantly longer. Well, not significant. I have been in campaigns, 1, maybe 2, that were longer than that. It's hard to tell because the sessions weren't, I don't know how long a session they are imagining, so whatever. But yeah, an 8-session campaign of Heart makes absolute sense to me.
Yeah.
Let's explain beats.
Yes.
Every character has a calling. A calling is your reason for being in the Heart. So, while in D&D you might have a class and a background, in Heart you have a calling and, well, also a class. The class is the class. It's the same thing, kind of. Yeah. But the calling is your reason for being in the Heart, and your class is the reason you're not dead yet.
Yes.
Every calling has beats, and beats are basically goals. So things you, as a player, not a character, want to get done. For every session, you have to have 2 beats active.
Yes.
And these can be things like, oh, I want 3 different landmarks to know my name. Or maybe it can be a beat that is a bad thing for your character, like, oh, I want to take a major echo fallout. Yes. Or other things, whatever.
Yeah, it could be something that's mechanical, or it could be something that's more flavoursome to give to the story. Yeah, and I really like that. Or it can
be like, if you're an Incarnadine and you have somebody you're indebted to your master, it can be like, oh, take orders from your master. That's going to be a beat, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You have minor beats, major beats, and you have zenith beats. When you have, I think, like 1 to 3, I don't remember if any callings have 3, but basically about 2 beats, zenith beats, sorry. Once you fulfill your zenith beat, which is like the ultimate thing you want to do, I guess, you get access to a zenith ability.
Yes.
If you do the zenith ability, which is this great source of power, you get 1 to 2 sessions until your character has to die.
Yeah.
A lot of the zenith abilities also tell you how you die.
Yes.
But, it might like take a second for it to happen, maybe. I like it because it makes character exits cinematic. Yes. You don't have to try to make them climactic. You don't have to try to make yourself feel cool. The rules and the mechanics make it really easy for you to have a really cool exit for your character. Yeah. That's not the only way your character can die. You can also get a critical fallout, which we mentioned earlier, by combining 2 major fallouts. That is always an option for the player. The GM can never force you to take a critical fallout.
I feel like with the classes as well, because again, like you said, I would suggest to players as well, because obviously we've got some really cool naming sounding ones, obviously like Cleaver, Deadwalker. Everyone loves a good deep aperist, let's face it.
Oh, I was about to say that.
I was like, of course I want to be a hive, walking hive bee person, of course. But like, I feel like if I wasn't sure, sometimes, again, when you're looking at all these, like, the minor and major, like, ability stuff, you're like, oh, God, there's a lot of, it feels like system jargon thing where really it's all flavoursome. I actually would suggest to players to look at the Zenith abilities and like, how do you want your character to die eventually?
Oh,
and then
that's a
work
good
backwards.
idea.
Yeah, because I think like some of them are really cool. Like, and as you mentioned, a lot of them are about like how you die. A lot of them are like in a blaze of glory or like super powerful, super scary, cinematic. But then there's one like the Incarnate is like, I pay off all my debt and I die around my family. I live a good life and that's it. And I was like, wow, yeah, great, love that.
Literally, yeah. The Incarnadine, that's like one of the only ones that you get to just go back to having a normal life.
Yeah, great. Because I think that's the thing that you've absolutely mentioned is that people don't come to the heart willingly. There is a reason for it. You know, the callings that they're forced, they're trying to find something, they're driven to it, and it's like the last resort. These people, they are not like the normal folks that we see up in the spire. You know, so,
I was about to say that. Yeah, the book says, it has a line that says, if you're in the heart, you're not a normal person. Nobody, I think I actually wrote this down, the line that I wanted. Yeah. You are not a normal person. Normal people don't give up their lives and willingly walk into terrifying labyrinths in the hope that they might find what they're looking for.
Yeah, I guess for you, is there a particular like class or calling? I mean, obviously, I know that you've played in it quite a lot. You run it. Is there ones that you would like to point out to people? Obviously, I know we keep going on about the Deep Aperist, but that is very cool. But is there anything?
Honestly, yeah, Deep Aperist is great.
Yeah.
Well, let me pull it up.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to be definitely biased towards the ones that I've either played or have had players play, but Junk Mage is my soft spot because that's like a character I had for a while. Junk Mages are these magicians. They were in the city above, but they felt that there was something more, so they went to the city beneath and they started stealing power from creatures or beings or whatever, that you channeled tremendous power. And, you know, you have a lot of power, but it's also very addictive.
Yes.
So a lot of comparisons that often happen when I've played a Junk Mage, at least, or that I see other people do, is they show things that sort of resemble actual addictions. Because, I mean, that's also the wording used here.
Yes.
It says here, you relish the touch of madness of accursed insight into the vast and terrible truths that hide beneath the reality. Sanity, safety, reputation, all these are secondary to the pursuit of arcane majesty.
It also reflects back to when we think of, say, like, you know, I'm thinking of like films like Indiana Jones or that sort of thing, where there's like that person has to get the cursed artifact. They're like, no, I must need this, and then being pursued. But yeah, putting it in terms of like addiction, like again, obviously lines and veils, you know, your mileage may vary, but I really enjoy it because it makes me think of like, you know, like the rogue that's always stealing because they want to have more power, and it's just like that slow little bit of corruption stuff. Yeah, I think Junk Mages are super interesting because they have this like they want more power, and there's all this occult knowledge and stuff like that. And just that sort of twist on the sort of traditional story of just stealing for anything like that. It's like, no, I must become more powerful. And the idea of like it being a magician of some sort and then just slowly growing in power. Yeah, everything about it, I'm just like, that sounds like a really interesting story to tell.
Another one that's really interesting, I have never played this one or had a player play this one, so it's not a soft spot thing. So you really know I'm not biased if I'm talking about it. But the Hounds are really interesting because they come with so much lore. Basically, in the past, there was this 33rd Regiment, and they were sent down to the heart to do some sort of thing, but they failed, and then they all died eventually. They did something terrible, so a bad thing. And then eventually, after all of them died, there are now 300 badges. After I don't know how many hundreds of years or whatever, there are now 300 badges scattered. Some people are wearing them, some are waiting to be found. It says, when you steal one or have it bestowed upon you, you join the Hounds, the new name of the 33rd, protectors of the fragile populace of the heart. You carry the weight of their deeds on your shoulders, and a Hound cannot die while there's a single person breathing in the heart, and that is a curse and a gift.
Yeah.
Naturally.
The two-shot I played, someone did play a Hound, and I, again, had no idea. It has very much like World War One themes. There's this idea of a bunker, like this sort of like I think it's tier 3, and it's just like this idea of like you never stop and the war is always on, and then all these horrible things are happening. And yeah, you are not your own person anymore when you're a Hound. Like you are not the word is not possessed, but you're sort of taken over, like, this is your duty now.
Yeah.
And there's something so powerful about such an imagery that, yeah, like some of the abilities where, you know, the Zenith abilities is like you give up your life, you protect the landmark and all that sort of thing. It's so interesting, you know.
And one of the Zenith abilities for the Hound is that your actions have earned you the ultimate reward. Your name replaces the one marked on your badge, and you are officially inducted into the 33rd. So the name of the badge, okay, the person who was originally wearing the badge that came down to the heart all these years ago, your name replaces that name. And I think that's really cool. It's interesting.
Yeah, compared to like Everlasting Stand, where you become that sort of consciousness, that protection and stuff, and the incursion where you're constantly fighting. This is just like you have earned your place to be absorbed into the Hound. I think like the Hounds are very interesting, and again, something I would love to include if I was running this as a campaign. I'd definitely include the Hounds. I'd also include maybe something on the Vermissian transport system.
I was literally about to, yeah. So okay, so. All right. The Vermissian is a failed experiment by people in the Spire. They tried to create a transport system for the people in the Spire, and they tapped into the heart as a power source to fuel the Vermissian. But oh my god, that is the stupidest thing you could possibly ever do.
It's like, who thought this was a good idea? Who in the meeting was like, I've got an idea. Why no?
Some stupid elf here, probably.
Yeah, clearly an elf here. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my god, terrible.
So, because they tried to tap into the heart, which, like, people don't even know what it is, and you're trying to control it, and it went completely awry. It not only did the Vermissian not work, it made the heart itself worse.
Yep. So much worse.
It made the heart itself less stable and more dangerous. And now the Vermissian is just this bunch of abandoned train stations.
Oh, love it.
I don't even know if you could even find a abandoned train. I think that was a plot point in the game I was running that we never got to, because the Vermissian was something that was quite reoccurring, but yeah, it's mostly just a bunch of abandoned stations. And there's also Vermissian Knights, which is one of the other classes that basically they try their best to understand it's called the parasite reality and protect others they find there. They are often hired as guides for moving through the network, and they might like inscribe the names of landmarks that they've discovered or find stable routes or whatever. So they do that sort of thing. But it's just the lore, again, that comes with all of it is really interesting. And I've had some Vermissian Knights as NPCs in a game before, and so much that went in with it. But yeah, it's just, the Vermissian is so fascinating.
If you live somewhere that has a public transport system, instantly for me, I'm thinking of like the London Tube system, so the Underground, that sort of thing. Like you could easily take the names off like places like Mornington Crescent, all that sort of, and you repurpose them for your own thing, because it's just this idea of these desolate abandoned stations. You're like, what possibly could live there? And it's like a whole manner of things which are awful, but then having these knights that have like their own armor, which has this way of like sort of again combining themselves with the transport. And then I think right at the end, one of their Zenith abilities is like I think they end of the line, they disappear, but then the other characters get an access to an ability called Deus Ex Machina, and where they're like, oh no, and then this Vermissian Knight comes back and helps them for one final time. But it's sort of like they've retired that character, but they come back as a sort of way to save them from the final boss fight, which I just thought was what a cool idea. Again, if you're having this character creation with the other players, saying that I really like this idea, how do people think about it? I think just building your characters, like what party goes to the heart, and maybe they enlist, like you said, like a Vermissian Knight to help them go through the network. Because I feel like the network is, again, something I would love to explore more. Again, each of these bits of lore, I'm like, these are really interesting. You can't cover it in just one campaign. I think you have to have multiple campaigns at heart with different characters to explore so much more of it. Because you don't want to, I guess, oversaturate it with all these things, because then there's just too much stuff to focus on, especially if it's player-led.
Because a hard campaign is supposed to be short, you just will never be able to explore more than a couple of landmarks in a campaign, and you shouldn't, because you should focus. There's so much to get out of just one single landmark. Yeah, like we can talk about some of them. Yeah, but every single one is a powerhouse of creativity and fascinating, interesting world building that it would just be such a waste to ever just use it for half a session and move on. And I've had to sometimes do that. You kind of have to do that. I mean, thing is, you do that a lot anyway because you're delving and moving around so much, so you can never really truly explore them that much. But there's so much replayability to Heart.
Yeah.
Especially because, you've played it a couple times. Now you've got a world. Now you've got maybe recurring characters, or you create your own landmarks. It's very easy to create your own landmarks.
It's like you were saying, like you can then connect these stories, even if you have completely different characters. You can, like, obviously the go-to thing is like revisit the same landmark, but the previous players had an impact on it. But I like the idea that a name is the thing that connects it and all that sort of thing. And just to say before we move on to landmarks as well, like just to quickly talk about the ancestries. So here you've got like the sort of 4 ones that it sort of gives you. Again, there's no mechanical benefit. It just helps you sort of like, again, if you've played Spire or read a bit of Spire, it's sort of, again, who has come to the heart from Spire or from outside it. You have Alfir, which are sort of the high elves, you have Drow, you have humans, and you have gnolls. But each of them have their own interesting sort of background to it. Like obviously Drow and Alfir play quite a prominent role in Spire itself. Gnolls are often from outside Spire, from a different land. Maybe again, I was wondering in future if there's going to be like another RPG which focuses on them, or a supplement that focuses on that particular one.
Yeah, that's
you know what
so
I mean?
interesting.
Because they are trying to find intel, that particular kingdom that they're from. They're trying to find intel on Spire, and so they're going to infiltrate via the heart. And you're like, well, that's the worst possible thing you can do. But then I don't know, full frontal assault outside, or you go underneath and in. So yeah, and they have like questions and stuff like that. But what, again, as it has done in Spire, I know this, but it talks about racism. And it said, like, we don't really have time for it. Everyone's in the shit because it's the heart. Whereas Spire was about this political intrigue, about this sort of class warfare, etc. You can explore it in that, and then obviously take characters from Spire into heart. Obviously, I know it'll change it a little bit, but it's like there's no point in punching down here because everything is trying to punch you.
Exactly. So I describe it. I think I said this last time I was on the show, and the heart is such an equalizer where everybody's here because they were running from something. Gnolls, Elfirs, Drows, or humans. And they're all trying to be killed by the heart. Most people, I mean, in your game, maybe if you want to continue this thing, you can, but most people are, if they're going to be killed, they're being killed for what they've done and who they are, and not, as the book says, who your parents are.
100%. Yeah.
But there is still a lot of lore that comes with each of these ancestries. There are a lot of history, I should say. Like, for example, the Gnolls. They are at war with the Elfirs. A lot of the Gnolls that are in the city beneath are there because they went into hiding, because they're not allowed in the Spire. A lot of Elfirs that will come down to the heart are, maybe they were in like high up positions and then they had to flee, or God, something, whatever.
Because I do think, like, compared to other RPGs and stuff like that, we always said, oh, well, I want to be like an elf ranger, or I'm going to play like a tiefling warlock, all that sort of thing. It's not about who you are. It's like, what is your actions? Where have you come from? And a lot of times, like I joke about it all the time. So I don't need to read your backstory. Like, we're doing it together. But here, you've got these little bits of questions and stuff like that. So it gives you that intrigue as a player, that sort of initial sort of grip. And it goes, and now where do you want to go? And then you give that to the GM. So it's just, again, it's just a different way of just turning it on its head. I think it's called like proactive role playing, in the sense of like, here's what the players want. Now it's up to the GM to then go, right, rather than like the players sit back and then react to it and go, well, that's not in my backstory, but I guess I'll go on with it. So I think it's just such a different way of doing it.
Also, if you think about it, there's nothing to unify people like a common enemy, and the heart can be that.
The heart reminds me of like Alien in a way, because everyone's like, oh, well, obviously we know what the big bad is. It's Alien. You're like, yes, that is true, but also it's about all these horror. It's a horrible place to be in. So I like the idea that heart is exactly that. You know what the big bad is. It is hard, but it's also everything else about it. Like, it's the monsters. It's this. It's the landmarks that's appearing. So yeah, I think it's on the surface. It's like heart. You'll die by it. That sort of thing. Yeah, let's talk about some of the landmarks then. So obviously I know like you've run a little bit more of Heart. Is there a particular landmark that you really love using, or one that's come up quite a bit, or the one that you've seen and got, damn, I want to use that more?
I try never to reuse landmarks because there's so many interesting ones and I want to explore all of them. There's some that that have had a bigger focus in previous campaigns, like let me find what it was called.
Because the thing to say as well is that you've mentioned it before, is that the way the heart works is that, again, very much like when you're moving through distances and stuff like that, there's tiers of the heart. So like you said, so tier 0, that's normally where Derelictus is. So like a starting city, perhaps where everything's the safest. And then tiers 1, 2, 3, the closer you get to the actual heart itself, the weirder things go. So all these landmarks in the book itself, they are tied to particular tiers. So you vaguely know like how weird shit's going to be. But equally, there are some that move about as well, which I thought was interesting.
Well, yes, there's some that move about far more, but the quality of moving about is one that is present with all of them, possibly.
Yes, agreed. Yeah,
they could all at any point move around. That's why maps are pointless. I mean, not pointless. You can still get some use out of them, but they do expire. They expire.
Yes. I think one of the things before we move on to that, because it gives you like, here's a plain map that you and your players can make your own copy of the heart on.
Like.
Yeah, it's like, I like that idea. Like, okay, you do that, and then go, well, we're trying to get back to this place. It's like, oh. And then you just go, if you're in person, I just go, oh, and I just do a big cross. It's not there anymore. Do you want to go try and find it? Like,
well, they're not going to move around that frequently where like in 2 days they might be gone. And you can actually so again, like what I talked about earlier, where the more people are in a certain place, the more stable it becomes.
Right, yeah.
And that's sort of, you can, if you go from one place to another, you can do things like establish a connection, so it's easier to get back to that place, the previous place and whatnot. But also the more you just like walk that one road, it just starts to become more stable and safer. Whatever.
Like they're called like natural pathways. So when there's like a pavement that's just like on a corner, but you want to get across that other way, and people just walk over the grass. That's how I imagine it. It's like the more you walk over the grass, the more it becomes an actual path. So yeah.
One I vaguely mentioned earlier that I absolutely love, that I used recently on Girls Run These Worlds, is the Labyrinth. Let me open it.
Yes.
There's this thing called the Labyrinth Curse, which if you get the Labyrinth Curse, then it's a disease and it makes you want to build mazes around yourself using anything and everything that you have. It could be chairs. It could be, maybe you're actually a construction dude and you've got all these stones and you actually can do actual mazes. Maybe it's like all these books that you have, cupboards, pieces of paper, people, corpses. Maybe you have a bunch of corpses around, and maybe you have a grave. Maybe you're a guy that works at a grave. Anything, you have to keep building mazes around yourself. The Labyrinth is a commune of around, and I'm reading directly from the book, of around 150 infected builders who are expanding more and more each year. So it's about 150 people who are building mazes around themselves, and that's the Labyrinth. And I use that quite prominently in the short, not really, but a standard-sized hard campaign that I did for Girls Run These Worlds a few months ago, where they went to the Labyrinth, and then the Labyrinth Curse was actually something that the big bad was infected by, and set up and payoff type of thing. But yeah, the Labyrinth is one that I've wanted to use for a while. And I love it. I also love a lot of just the stations, the remission stations, like the Grip Station. The Grin Station is one that I really wanted to use, but I ended up, we didn't get to it. I also ended up creating my own spin of like what I wanted to. So I was never really going to end up using it, but the Grin Station is another remission station if I can find it.
Yes, tier 2.
Tier 2. Designed as an underground tourist destination by a well-meaning but totally clueless Elfir in the city above, Green Station is a decrepit, crumbling amusement park that has been taken apart and rebuilt several times over the last century.
Spooky amusement parks? Absolutely not. I see it. I can imagine the light coming on. It's like, welcome. And I go, no. I turn around. I'll go back into Labyrinth. That's where I'll go,
Yeah, fucking the music and stuff like in a circus.
Exactly, really discordant, the merry-go-round, all that sort
Yeah.
of thing. And yeah, just to say, yeah, the labyrinth stuff I think is really interesting because, like, yeah, it could be like made out of like, you know, stone or whatever, but actually it is more terrifying to think like, what around you is it made out of? Like, you know, is it made out of just bodies, or is it made out of like the books thing? I really see that like a just a maze of like books and papers and stuff. Like, I've been into so many secondhand bookshops where, you know, they've just got
Yeah.
mile high thing, and you're like, this could crush me at any point. So that
Yeah.
claustrophobicness, yeah, absolutely.
There's one that we focused on in a campaign we did called Gorin, which is basically Gorin is sort of this concentrated like a town with like this concentrated group of like conspiracy theorists.
Yes.
But and then there's this one guy in Gorin called Baldery who's a bit of like he's the rich guy in town, whatever.
Gives you the money to go and do this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, he has this wealth of information. Da, da, da. But really, what you eventually find out is Goran is the creation of his mind. Everybody in the town does not exist. It's a creation of his mind, and it is in a perpetual cycle of being built. Then being eventually Baldery himself will realize the truth, burn everything down, and then it will reappear elsewhere. Baldery will once again appear elsewhere on the heart, in the heart, create Goran from scratch, and once again the cycle will
keep repeating itself. Yeah, because he locks those memories away about what the heart truly is, and then it's so interesting that again that
Goran truly is.
Goran, but it's it feels like very much like the Hound stuff we were talking about as well. That constant cycle of people over and over again. There's lots of cycles, lots of like repeating patterns, repeating mistakes that we get throughout. And yeah, I really love that idea of like realizing like it is just this one person, and everyone else is just like a figment of this person's imagination or reflecting it. And maybe you as players see this like it's the same face. I always think of it when I run like D&D or something. Like every NPC just has my face. That's all it is. You know, that's not a horror thing, but just like because it's saying my voice and I don't really change my voice. It's just Fiona's face, but on a small child, on a dog, on the dragon.
God.
You know.
Oh my god.
I really liked the tower, which is another one you mentioned as well. And it's so
sorry.
I think it's so interesting because like compared to like the labyrinth and everything, this idea of like we have this architect from the city above us, like I've got this perfect way that everyone will live in harmony, and people are like, no, this is too much, and cast this Althea out. So she builds this tower, and everyone does live in perfect harmony. Because they're mind controlled. It's great. I think of any sort of dystopian, like, High Rise is the one I think of. Any sort of film where it's like, everyone, do you want to, and getting fallout from this, like, you want to live here. It's perfectly lovely here. And just having these glyphs, very hive mind like, again, if you're a deep apurist, all that sort of thing. It's just, everything about that. I was like, this is very unsettling, but I can't, it's everything is working, technically, but we've been forced to stay here. I just thought, really cool, really interesting.
I used the tower in a game, and I had this little side plot thing that the players got to discover of this couple that had been traveling, and they got to the tower, and they were, I don't know where they were traveling to, but I got to the tower, and the husband went in just to ask for directions, or maybe to like trade or ask for rations or something, just for a minute. And in that time he got mind controlled and stayed and started living there, forgot with time about the wife's existence, and got his own room, apartment, job, The wife eventually died, but she became a spirit that is constantly asking any passerbys of like, I'm sorry, could you please go in and check in on my husband and ask him to come out? I don't want to go in. And basically the players went through the whole rigmarole of getting the husband to come out, and then he stepped out. Suddenly the memory started rushing back in. He stood in front of the wife and he was like, I'm here, and the wife just continued like a broken radio of, could you please go back and ask her husband to come out, because she was dead. She was see-through. She was a ghost. She was a shell of what she used to be, as a broken radio, just remembering the last thought, the last desire that she was stuck with. Luckily the players were able to go into the grey and release her from her torment, but the husband just like, after he realized what's happened, he just stepped back into his prison and
Whoa.
tragic.
What a great story. Oh, kudos to you. That I'd like, again, but it's one of those things where no matter what you do, it's still going to be a sad ending is not what I think of, but it's just like, this is part of the heart. This is just an everyday thing. And just experiencing it. It's just, and the players experiencing that. It's just, yeah, kudos. I'm clapping you. I'm like, yeah, amazing.
Oh my God.
I don't know. We could talk more about like this idea of fractures, so weird portal places. So you talked about the grey just then. So this idea of an afterlife that
I love the grey.
It's so good. It's also so not weird. That's not what it is. It's also so like despondent, like this idea that you're in the grey and then you just see people who are just sheltering in doorways and they look scared and all that sort of thing. And just, God, is this the afterlife?
To explain to people what the grey is, it's basically one of the heavens of this world. There's presumably 8 heavens, though we counted 7 in the back of the book.
We both had to check this number, yeah.
It was a little bit confusing. But it's one of the heavens of the world, and one of the classes can actually access it. They're called Deadwalkers, and this is basically a limbo state. It's a place between life and death, and so it's sort of, I guess it's not quite a heaven itself. I guess it's kind of like,
it is limbo. I think it is that sort of waiting around until obviously, as you said to mention, there are other heavens as well, like the forest. The Grail Road is what I was referring to. That idea of people just hiding in doorways and stuff. And also, I know we've not mentioned it at all anything to do with the religion of the moon or anything like that, which is also prominent here.
There's a lot of religions and sects and just groups in the heart.
But it is. I guess what I like about this, and I know you were saying that you used the grey quite a lot because it featured quite a lot in your stories, is that you could just, again, because of the way it's written, you could be like, any of these work, none of these work. You don't have to have all of them in. Like certain callings or certain classes will tie themselves to, say, the forest or to the grey or anything like that. But equally, if you're like, hey, we're going to change it around a bit, it is all going to be the forest. That's okay, because each of these sort of like different interpretations of an afterlife,
I love that.
It's great, and it sort of shows that, we're not just stuck to one particular view of a religion that's like this is what it is,
I have a question to you. So because I have some blank spots, I do have some gaps in knowledge, and you said that you read it cover to cover today or whenever you did. Are there classes that have the ability to go into any of the other heavens, like Deadwalkers with the grey?
So not so much with the Deadwalkers is the main one that can traverse the grey, like using that as a way to go through. As always, it says, you can make your own callings, you could make your own classes, just change things around. So I think it's nice that we have these different versions of an afterlife that aren't just going to one point of view. And again, if you are if you're into D&D, like obviously we have stuff like the Beastlands and all that sort of thing, like different planes of existence. Maybe if you want to transfer people over or like have those connections of like different systems, different world stories, that's a similar thing you could do there. Like you could put the grey is Limbo in D&D, or the forest is the Beastlands, that sort of thing as well. So if you need more inspiration for these particular things. Yeah, I think the only other landmark I wanted to mention very quickly is the one that is to do with the carrion pigs. Because I feel like we've talked a little bit about how body horror this is, how sort of dungeon delvy it is. We've not looked at the adversaries too much. I mean, if you think of something that's really horrible, it's worse than that, and they're in here. But there's something about pigs, particularly in Heart, the idea that people are keeping these swines as a way to produce certain resources and stuff like that, but then the creatures themselves, they can escape, cause havoc. Again, like how I imagine sort of like wild animals like elephants would be. Like, if they know another one of their kind is being captured, they're going to tear places apart. And swinefall just sounds dreadful. Again, it has that sort of labyrinth, twisting, there's sluices, slippery chutes, stuff like that. And then there's just these pigs everywhere, and it's sort of like a bestial court. We have sort of like a carrion swine pig that's taking center court. So I don't know. For me, it was something that, again, pigs are very scary, I find, because they eat anything. And we've heard stories of them. People falling drunk into their sties, and the next day they're no longer there because the pigs have eaten them. So I can absolutely see where they put them on pigs into that. There was swinefall, and then there was one. I think it was in the adversaries. There's this idea of an owl hive, which I don't know if you've heard of, which is essentially like owls used to be like had some. It was a long ago a fable where the owls were sort of chastised by the moon, so they went underground, and now this particular adversary is very much like, imagine owls were like bees, and they have the hive, but they move around, they stuff around, they have them, they have eggs on their backs, that sort of thing. And it's just, again, it's that horrible thing where they like human-sized owls that come to you through that passageway. So I can just imagine this idea, this horrible creature coming towards you. So yeah, I wanted to say, like, any adversary you can think of, it's much worse than you think. And it's not, and it doesn't have to be body horror. It could literally be pulled from like real animals in the real world, and just turn them up a little bit, like to 11 or something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I guess my sort of final sort of question to you is that if somebody has listened to us go on about how amazing Heart is for like an hour and a half, and they wanted to run Heart for the first time, so it's their first time running Heart, what sort of big bit of advice would you give to them as someone who has run quite a few sessions of it?
Well, the big one, I mean, not to be a parrot, but, you know, don't plan that much. Have ideas of where you want the story to go, but typically I'd say I connect that to the NPCs that I've got and the characters that I've got and what they want to do. Use those beats like clutches. Because at the end of the day, that's how your characters level up. There's no leveling up in Heart. That's how you progress as a character. You get beats done, then you get an ability for them. The abilities are great. They're very interesting. More logistics related advice I'd say is know those fallouts like the back of your hand, so you can understand what fallout you want to give to your players like pretty quickly, because you can't have them sit there for 10 minutes while you're looking through the book. Speaking from experience, I mean, I've had them do that, but you really shouldn't. So I ended up making these like decision charts when I was doing the live show, because I was like, oh my God, I can't sit. I know I will not be able to make this decision within seconds, even if I take a really short time of 20 seconds to come up with a decision in a live Twitch show.
It feels like a year, doesn't it? Yeah.
So what I ended up doing, and this isn't really advice for people running the game, but this is whatever I did. This is I would keep track of what fallouts there are, and I would figure those out during the break and then between episodes. Figure out what landmarks you think are cool and you want to eventually go to. And figure out how you're going to connect the plot to them, I guess.
I think I like the idea of the flowcharts, to be honest with you. I think that to me is always super helpful going if they do, you know, planning for like minimal prepping, I guess is the thing, right? It's like,
honestly, I can just send it to whoever it was. Like, I think they're kind of cool and helpful. I mean, there's like some things I would change about it, but hey, if anyone wants it, like, send me a DM. I'll fucking send those flowcharts.
Yeah, I think because I think it's to help narrow down the choices for you, right? Because I think that's the thing with sometimes you're like, what do you do? And it's like, possibilities are endless, and you're like, you're getting overwhelmed with it. And it's similar with the players as well. Whereas normally with players, you narrow it down to like one or like three options that they have, and you say it out sensibly. And the same thing for you as well. The players can do anything. All right. Well, if they do combat, if they explore, they do this, and then you can always tweak it as it goes. And I think it's just so helpful to have that in the moment. Like I'm the same. I said to you before, I hold on to my adventures so tightly, and then if I don't like it, I'm like, okay, I can jump off a little bit, but I can always go back to it. Whereas here, obviously, it feels like, oh God, I don't know. But then I think having those rails in place for yourself to be like, here are some guides for me, especially I totally agree with you when you're doing a live show, you're like, give me a moment, I need to look something up. And if I can't find it in like...
I'm also a slow reader, which really doesn't help.
I'm also so bad at like type, because I try and have everything on a PDF so I can search it. But even then I'm like, I don't know what I'd search for. So I agree. Like if you get like 15 seconds in, it feels like everyone's died and no one's having fun. But the energy goes out the room. So I always make a decision going, right, if I can't find it in 15 seconds, I'll look at it in the break. But this is what my gut is. And again, if you tell your players that as well, they'll go, yeah. And they're not going to be hard done by, unless they go, well, actually, I found it. And it's just, you go, well done. You have got quicker reading skills than me. We'll go with that. You know, like you said, don't worry about prep. Finding landmarks that interest you, but also like seeing what the players have, and then you go, oh, well, maybe we can tie it into that, but not worry about it too much. Like it has to fit coherently because it's the Heart. No one's gonna everyone's like, oh, it's like nightmare logic. You're like, how did that happen? You go, no idea. And that's the fun of it, you know? So,
I guess I would like to like mention like two more things
yeah,
that
go
I
for it.
find interesting.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, we've touched about this, touched on this a lot, but I just thought it was like funny to mention that like the difference in scope between the planning I did for a heart campaign that I did, and the planning before it started, and the planning I did for a D&D campaign that I'm doing, which the D&D campaign is absolutely buck white. Like, I've got pages and pages of lore of the characters and how they're connected to the world, and I've got all these different locations and NPCs prepared and possibly where they would go, and I've got ship mechanics and whatever. With Heart, it was like prepare one location, a couple of NPCs, understand who the players are actually. And then I also had just, again, like I said, like wild ramblings of a madman of like where I want them to eventually go. And it was just like a couple of pages of stuff. Most of the planning came between the sessions and like during the sessions as we would finish a session. I would ask them, I would understand, like, as we played, like, where they're gonna go next. I would plan that. So it's just fascinating, like, the difference in the planning.
Well, I think it's true. Like, you go, like, the important thing is, like, what are the players, and understanding the players. I think that's so key. Again, we've talked about it a lot, that it makes sense for Hard. But in D&D, it's like, who are you? Cool. Doesn't matter for these sessions, but then, it might come later. I might hook you in as like, one of your parents is alive, you know?
Honestly, I feel like running Heart has influenced how I run D&D. I feel like I'm more, even though it's obvious, like, oh yeah, you should pay attention to what your players want to do. But I feel like I do look at it a little differently and a little bit of a beat-focused lens in a way. But there's also some advice in the book that I would easily use for D&D as well. Like, there's the part about combat says stuff about what to do if a fight is too tough, or what to do if it's too easy. Like, the first thing it says is what to do if the if a fight is too easy is like make the players feel bad for.
Yes, that's so
like,
different.
holy shit, that's such good advice. Oh my god!
Rather than increasing the hit points or anything like that, he goes, make them feel bad that they've just destroyed this thing. And you're like, yeah, that's actually such a great way, because it shouldn't feel victorious to fight in the heart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Again, this isn't really connected to anything, but I want to talk about the haggling in Heart. First of all, most of my quote unquote career of playing Heart, I actually didn't know this was a full, like, I don't know what, a gap in knowledge, I guess, gigantic gap in knowledge. I didn't realize most of purchases came from actual, like, money. I thought you exclusively used resources to trade.
Oh, how interesting.
If you wanted to buy something. I didn't realize you can, like, use the supply stress track to purchase things with actual coin, which is a thing that exists in the Heart. I thought that coins and like money and gold and whatnot weren't actually that common in the Heart. But then I read read that part of the book again, and there was stuff about haggling. And what's really, really fun is, if you want to haggle for a price, think about that in D&D. You can always do just a quick persuasion roll. Oh, I didn't get it. That's fine. I can just buy it at the original price. In Heart, if you succeed, you still buy it at the original price, but you actually get to keep your head. Yes. You have to succeed at no cost. You have to get it's a D10 roll. You have to get an 8, 9, or 10 to be able to actually lower the price of whatever you're buying. If you get 6 or 7, which is a success, but at a cost, you have the privilege of still purchasing the item at the original price, and the guy in front of you isn't mad at you and or like isn't going to come after you or whatever. If you fail, not only is the item now more expensive to purchase, but you might have somebody on your ass now. And it's also sometimes hard to find somebody to sell something to or buy something from. Like, and also anything can be a resource. I love the resource tags and also example resources, because anything can be a resource as long as there's someone out there willing to buy it, which
100%.
obviously, I mean, that's also the case in real life and everything, but whatever. But there's also like the tag that's like the niche tag, which is like there's a really small, specific group of people that want this thing, and you have to find them to be able to sell this to them or buy this from them. And I don't know, I love the resource tags. And one of the resource tags is like, if you don't keep an eye on this thing, item on this physical item, not person, it'll stand up and walk away from you. And I just fucking love this game so much.
I like the tags thing because there's like a tag of taboo where you can't sell this item, but there are certain places, as you said, there's certain deep web Etsy stores that will take a particular item, and you can't like you'll have like a bag of teeth, and it's like you can't just sell this at the corner store. You have to find a weirdo that'll want this item. It's no Baldur's Gate where you just offload everything and you get like 1,000 gold. But I too think like, okay, gold is, I understand why they might have it, but I feel like the heart, like you said, why would anyone need gold? It is all bartering, or it is more like resource, right?
I don't know if they specify gold, but they say coin.
Coin, yeah.
As sort of a name for money.
Yeah, I think like again, I think any bit of resources, because you're in the middle of the heart. It is, everyone's on survival mode. So I like your interpretation of like, oh, there's no coin, great, and just going through that, and then maybe coin is superb. Like, I've got all this money from the city above, and it's fucking worthless here. What am I going to do? So, I just...
Average Alfir experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, Alfir going on holiday going like, this is...
Alfir's selling their house to start a new life in the heart, and suddenly they're fucking...
nothing.
Shit,
and they have to sell their mask or something, and it's, terrible. Yeah. Oh, Shahiq, thank you so much for coming along and chatting to me about Heart. Honestly, I would highly recommend folks checking it out, reading it. Obviously, there's a quick start out. There's the new version of Heart, which is slightly updated stuff. They've got
there's a new version of Heart. Oh my god,
like a revised edition. Nothing like compared to what we've covered. But they've got Dagger in the Heart. Obviously, their new adventure stuff has finally been released.
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
Yeah. So I think I'm with Shahiq on this. Like horror, obviously, it's my bag. Really love that. But I think like just the detail and like how it runs a game, or how you would run a story in this system and taking it out and maybe doing it, looking at other ways to run games. Definitely check it out. It's made me excited again to hopefully, fingers crossed, run it myself one day. Like I said, I think the system itself, once you start playing it, it's one of those things I was reading it and I was going, I bet this makes more sense when you start playing it. And as you were saying, like thinking about like Fallout and keeping a track of things and making sure you are prepped as a GM of that sense. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Shahiq, where can we find you if you want to be found on the internet? Is there anything you would like to plug?
Hi, thanks for listening, everybody. I am Shahiq, and my pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on Blue Sky at Shahiq, which is SHAGHIK.bsky.social. I would like to plug, last time I came on, I mentioned that me and a writing partner are writing an audio drama, and we did open an account, aka start a studio for it called CD Skipper, which is really exciting. Right now it's sort of a bare bones account, but I think by the time this episode comes up, we'll have a logo. We're reaching out to artists right now. We're writing and editing the scripts. Everything is moving slowly but steadily. Well, not that slowly. I think it's audio dramas take time. Anyway, we're reaching out to artists right now to get a logo. Right now, it's pretty much an empty account, but if you go to cdskipper.bsky.social, you'll find the account, and eventually we'll get a Patreon running, a mailing list, all that sort of thing to start advertising for eventually once it comes out, and then we'll be casting. And it's basically the show itself. It's basically a sort of small town mystery / murder mystery type thing, and it's not going to be very heavy. It's not a cartoon, but I guess I feel like it's somewhere between Twin Peaks and Scooby-Doo. I feel like stakes-wise and vibes-wise, but and I think it's really fun, and I'm so I feel like for me it scratches that Knives Out's itch, but also
fun.
That's me. I would say that. Actually no. Okay, you know what itch it scratches? Poker Face. Have you seen that show? with
it's
Natasha Lyonne.
I was gonna say, Natasha, I've not seen it. It's on my watch list.
Well, if people have seen it, listening to this have seen it, that's the vibe.
That's the vibe. Oh, amazing. Yeah, I've heard so many good things about it. So, yes. Oh, well, congratulations on opening the studio and everything. Best of luck for all that. It's exciting. 2025 is your year. So it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to seeing what else. And of course, we'll have you back on to talk about more RPG stuff in future because it's an absolute delight as always. Thank you so much, listeners, for listening to this episode of the DM's Book Club. We'll be back again next week with another topic. But until then, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye. Hey everyone again, just popping in last second to mention one more thing. I have a new show out. It's a solo actual play. There's only 3, maybe 4 episodes out when you're listening to this. It's called Roll by Myself, and the easiest way for you to find everything to do with it, all the links, would be to go to the Blue Sky, which would be rollbymyself.bsky.social. That's ROLL by myself.bsky.social. Thank you. Go check it out.